when government is pressured by money concerns over public safety concerns, very scary things happen.
Scary indeed. Deputy District Attorney Steve Ipsen is seeing that due to severe budget deficits, convicted murderers are being released back out on our streets.
It is becoming increasingly prevalent, both the parole of murderers and the request for a compassionate release of people who've been even recently convicted of murder, and there's a reason for that, and it's a disturbing reason. And it goes back to what we've discussed since, I think, back in 2006, 2007, you've been focused on, is the overcrowding problem in prisons.
In 2009, a panel of 3 federal judges decided that overcrowded conditions in California state prisons are so bad that the state must release between 35,000 to 40,000 inmates. Their judgment was that the overcrowding had come to the point that conditions became unconstitutional, meaning they violated the 8th Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is caught between a rock and a hard place.
The state law is very clear that you can't release anyone before the 50% mark, and they've been following that. Unlike county jails, like our Sheriff Baca, who is releasing people at 10% time or 20% of their time. So they do virtually no time. The state has been very good about, for all crimes, whether it's selling marijuana or bouncing a check or stealing a car, they're in there for 50% of their time. There's nothing they can do to alleviate the pressure in the state prison system except one area, and that's the life inmates, and that's murderers. So that creates a real problem where you're under a federal injunction saying you've got 40,000 too many people. You've got huge expenses of incarceration, and you have a budget problem. So our budget problem and our overcrowding problem and the federal injunction has created a situation where the only way the penal system can save money is releasing murderers, which is a huge problem.
No kidding. To illustrate this, Mr. Ipsen gave a personal example.
2 weeks ago, I got a motion for a compassionate release. And it's the first motion I've gotten in 25 years of a murder. And I was surprised initially that this was a murder convicted in 1994 of a estranged boyfriend murdering his ex-girlfriend's new husband or new boyfriend. And the parole board under Marcy's law, that I was co-author of, just a year ago denied him parole for 10 years. And they documented the numerous violent attacks he had on the prison staff and his continued dangerousness. And then we get a compassionate release request, which can go to the court, and they can let a convicted murderer out where parole's been denied. They're supposed to be in for life. They still have 10 years before their next parole hearing, and there's a motion sent to the local judge and the prosecutor. And reading this motion was chilling, and what it said to me about the desperate desire to save money because of our overcrowded prisons. It costs a lot of money to keep people in who are lifers, people who are on death row, especially with medical problems.
We ask him to explain what compassionate release is all about.
There's a compassionate release provision in the penal code that's important, and it reads that if the person, the inmate, is in a comatose state, if the person is in a vegetative state and death is imminent, or if they are so physically disabled that they're of no threat to public safety, they can be released on compassionate release to expire in a facility. I think judges and prosecutors in very few cases are comfortable with that. If it's coma you can come out of, you don't want to do a compassionate release because there's no mechanism to go back in. And so you have to be very careful before you ever consider it.
So compassionate releases are irreversible. Once out, the murderer is out until they re-offend, and this is now a growing trend.
But I understand there is a significant explosion of these requests, and the case I received causes me huge concern that the pressures in the state prison system now, the economic pressures, are being released in the only place they can. It's sort of like if you have a brain hemorrhage. That pressure is building up and in the blood vein, and when it bursts, the damage it does is incredible. And so what doctors do is, how can we alleviate the pressure before the damage is done? And so that's why it's so important to alleviate the pressure in our criminal justice system in a way that doesn't harm public safety. Otherwise, that pressure goes the only way it can go. And right now, under the law, the only area that legally the CDCR, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, can legally release people earlier than 50% are murderers and life inmates. And compassionate release is one of the vehicles of release. So when you have someone who has medical expenses, you can save a lot of money per year by releasing them.
Mr. Ipsen believes we should look at the problem from a new perspective.
The solution is not on the side of what do you do with the most serious and violent and dangerous offenders? Should we release this one person or not? The solution is on the side of, is the criminal justice system properly handling cases on the district attorney level, on the court level, and can we do a better job to make sure that those that threaten our safety are incarcerated to the extent and time they need to be incarcerated without early release, so that they know there's a credible punishment.
In other words, people who pose a danger to society deserve to remain in prison as punishment for their crimes of violence. Those who aren't a danger should be remanded to some kind of rehabilitation or restitution program. Without this realignment of priorities, the decision of who will be released will be left to the Department of Corrections.
The Department of Justice and the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is not in a position to deal with their overcrowding problem. The problem is created in the court system and with the district attorney of every county that is failing to properly prioritize what crimes are prosecuted, how they're prosecuted, and make sure that those incarcerated present a threat to public safety.
What will it take to change the priority of incarceration, we ask him?
I think it's very clear that there is a problem with how the criminal justice system is working, and a modification, a relatively simple modification and change of our approach, focusing on dangerous offenders being incarcerated and others with an effort to reform them before their conviction takes place, can deal with the overcrowding problem by dealing with the least dangerous offenders rather than releasing murderers.
The current trend by corrections and parole to reduce the overcrowding problem is dangerously misguided.
We're looking at, I'd say, absolutely the wrong side of the equation. We can't solve it by deciding which murders are released.
We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Please respond to our survey and be sure to leave your comments below. Number 1, do you think that murderers who are sick and dying should be released in order to save money? Number 2, do you think that prison overcrowding is a cruel and unusual punishment for murderers? And number 3, do you think that dangerous murderers can be rehabilitated? Please be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.